我用 Audacity 錄Eric。Okay. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Hi everyone. Can you guys all see me? Can you guys all hear me? I'm so excited to be going live here today on my YouTube channel, and I have Steve beside me, like not physically, but we are here online together. And like, if you can hear me, please type in the comment section that you can hear me and that you can see me. My assistant will be checking that everything is all right. Okay, that's good. And it's the first time that I'm recording a podcast live. Well, I think I might have recorded another podcast episode live before, but not with a guest beside me. So I'm pretty excited. And today I'm going to do, I have announced on Instagram and other social media platforms that I'm rebranding my podcast. And the reason that I'm rebranding my podcast is that before I invited Steve to join me to record this podcast, I was doing it all alone. And when I was doing it alone, I felt that sometimes the acoustic effects weren't as good. It could have been better. And sometimes I would be recording a podcast episode when I was outside. So when you guys hear my podcast, you are not going to be as happy with the sound quality. So this is why I plan to rebrand my podcast. The second reason that I'm doing this is that you guys know that I kept changing the format of my podcast because sometimes all I had in a week was 5 minutes. Sometimes I had 20 minutes in a week to do the recording. And so I kept changing the format, which led to the fact that many of you probably aren't used to a fixed format in the podcast. But I felt that if you guys were to develop the habit of listening to my podcast, I would have to fix the format somehow. And so this is why I felt that perhaps like doing a conversation with someone would make a good format for a podcast. So this is the second reason. So this is basically why I am like rebranding the podcast. And I think the third reason would be that if I have someone to talk to, like Steve, like I would be able to hold myself accountable to doing the recording every single week. Because like even if I'm fine with having a flexible schedule, that may not be the case for Steve. And if I have someone to talk to, there is a male voice and there is a female voice. Maybe we can do some sort of conversations so that you guys can learn better. So these are the three reasons why I'm rebranding my podcast. And the second thing that I want to talk about is why invite someone to do the podcast with me. Actually, I talked about it already. Like the first thing is I can hold myself accountable to doing the recording. The second reason is we can do some sort of conversation so that you guys won't feel bored to death from hearing to me speak all the time. And I don't want to have just one voice in the podcast. I want two voices and maybe multiple voices in the future. We don't know. Maybe we can invite some guests over or some guests over to speak with us. I don't know. Like anyway, like if you guys all that you guys are hearing is my voice, you guys may feel bored of it really easily. So I don't want my podcast to tire you guys out. So this is basically it. 係啦，咁我頭先咧就講咗一次點解我要 rebrand 我個 podcast 啦。第一樣嘢咧就係、因為我之前 podcast 嗰個 format 成日都轉啦，有時有5分鐘啦，有時有15分鐘啦，跟住有時又聽下啲即係 drama 啦，有時又我自己 ramble 啦，咁我就覺得咧，可能你哋會唔係太習慣嘅 ，OK？ 咁第二樣嘢咧就係、其實講緊話我熄咗嗰個 WhatsApp 先，因為咧有啲聲啊。係啦，咁第二樣嘢咧，其實就係講緊，如果淨係得我一個人喺度講咧，我驚你哋好悶啦，所以我就諗有一個靚仔嘅聲咧，嗱，就算佢唔係靚仔，佢靚仔聲都得㗎啦，即係 佢同我講下嘢咧，你哋會冇咁悶嘅。有個男聲有女聲咧，同埋我哋有啲 authentic 少少嘅 conversations 咧，你哋會聽到哦，原來係一個英文嘅一個 conversation 裏邊個波係點樣彈嚟彈去。OK，即係 how a person speaks to the other person and how the other person can respond. And I think this is what an authentic and a real life discussion can sound like. 咁就係咁樣咯，OK？哇，Kelvin 話 Steve is good looking，誇張喎呢個，即係做乜嘢？你而家讚壞咗佢咧，等佢陣間唔知講乜嘢。你唔好讚壞咗佢啊！So these are basically the reasons why we are doing this recording together. We are recording the podcast together, and also Steve is helping me teach a workshop. And a conversation workshop called 2-week spoken English challenge every Tuesday, like starting from the last week. And this is why, or this week, I'm not sure. So this is why I feel that the more Steve can let you guys know about him, the more you will trust him and me, okay? Because we are doing this challenge together and we are co-teaching and co-hosting this program together. We are like teaching in the program together, and I feel that it's always a good idea for you to know a little bit more about your teacher so that you trust him. You trust him so much that you sign up for his classes and you listen to him during the class. 大概就係咁啦 ，OK， 咁咧跟住第三我就想講點解揾阿 Steve 同我一齊去錄呢個 podcast， 點解係阿 Steve 呢個人咧 ？OK， so I think it's time for Steve to introduce yourself a little bit. Like there are still some in the audience that don't know you as well at this moment. So please introduce yourself, Steve.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, first of all. Thank you, Tiffany. By the way, I like your picture. You had a Fei Wong picture icon on your little there you go. One of my favorite album, by the way, back in the days. Anyway, how are you guys doing? So basically, my background is I am a comedian, and also I was a filmmaker, entertainer back in Los Angeles, in so-called Hollywood, right? So I lived in California for more than 20 years overall. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. 我係香港大嘅，我係香港土生土長啦。And then I joined an exchange student when I was 17. I went on to college. I lived back and forth between Hong Kong and the U.S. And before the pandemic, I have been an entertainer for more than I would say 10 to 12 years, and mostly I had to memorize script. I would do all the acting, but also on the side I teach people. I teach people stand-up comedy. I teach people about public speaking, and also I'm a public speaker, motivational speaker, and here I am. And thank you for having me.
It's great. Well, actually, we have finished talking about all the topics that we were going to talk about. Well, but it's always like I have heard about Steve's story, I think, for more than twice. I think I have heard your story for like twice or like 3 times or 4 times. I don't remember how many times I've heard your story, but every time I hear it, I just keep thinking about like issues, like what's challenging about being a comedian. And I imagine that it must be really hard, like for anyone to be a comedian, not to mention someone who's actually disabled, like physically, I mean. So
oh, sorry, go ahead.
More about like how it's like being a comedian, because I think many of us are intrigued.
So basically, a performer. Imagine a performer, someone you see on TV, right? On, let's say, TVB. Is TVB still popular? I don't know. In my days, there's TVB back in the days.
Like age groups.
Yeah. So maybe I think View TV or any entertainer that you know of, or social media guru like you, that it's like right now at this moment, right? in front of people, and there are strangers joining us, right? Or there
Yeah.
are somebody joining us, and imagine, like, you have to picture yourself. You are a communicator. You are always a communicator in front of the camera, sometimes off camera even, but there's another story. So it's like, why? What do I want to tell you? So it's not about just like making a joke, right? It's about why is your audience wasting time to listen to me right now, right? So I have something to give you. So that is really the number one thing, and this first thing for any basically anybody, right? To when you open your mouth to speak to somebody else, that's always this has to be something that in your mind is like, what do you want to say? I don't have that much time. Just tell me, convince me, right? It's like on the street, on the subway. If you want somebody, 唔該借 man, right? It's like 好多人翻工, right? It's like you go to work and there's so many people. When you say, excuse me, why do you say excuse me? Why do you just not just push someone away, right? When you say excuse me, usually somebody will be like, oh, oh, oh. People are more willing to give their space to you because you use the right word, because you use the right attitude, because you you you're sending the right signal to other people. So it's the same thing on a show. Like I go up on stage. By the way, my disability is actually a strength in comedy because it's about tragedy, right? And being disabled has a lot of tragedy I can talk about. Anyway, so it's about when I get up on stage, I cannot waste my time. Unless I waste my time purposely, like I don't talk like for the first minute. This is my acts, right? You want people attention in a good way. It's like, oh, this person is interesting. You know, it's just like right now, right? Like, why am I speaking to you? Why do you invite me? It's like, oh, I have something to say. For example, your course is about English conversation. That's what I'm giving. This is what we're giving to your student. So that the message that you want to tell the other person is just put that in mind. That's your goal and that's your mission.
And from what you said, I swear that I'm getting to the last question because like we don't have the time to go really
Okay.
deep into this issue. Because the thing is, like if we're going to talk about the nature of being a communicator and being a comedian and being a performer, I think we can go on and on. So my last question for you, Steve, is I from what you have said, I think that there's definitely this risk-taking element to it, right? Like communicating to another person. You don't know whether the other person is getting it, but you are trying to get across a message in your heart. You're trying to say something that you are thinking, and you never know. You can never know for sure. You can never know for 100% certainty that the other person is getting what you say, right? There's always this element of getting lost in translation, and don't you think that it takes a special person to be like a very open-minded person and a very risk-taking person to be a comedian, or do you think that anyone can do it? What do you think?
Um, okay, just like anything we do in life, is like, would you say, can you be a sales tomorrow? Or I give you 3 months, or I give you 6 months to a year and train you to be a sales. That's the difference, right? You have to go through training. You have to learn all the steps. So I think that's the most important thing in anything we do in life, right? It's just like English, just like speaking skills, anything. It takes time, it takes effort, and if you find a motivation, I think that's the first step. And then recognize learning there will be things that's going to be difficult. Like you will It's like 你學打拳, right? If you learn how to fight, you're gonna get your bone hurts. But the exactly. But it builds up, right? So you have a stronger arm, stronger wrist. It's the same logic. 你做每一樣嘢都要經歷過一啲學習嘅階段。只要你有個 motivation 去學，咁你會自然你會即係你肯去經歷呢啲咁嘅困難啦，所謂。咁你喺困難之中學習，呢個係最重要嘅。
My question was maybe there's something called the comedy gene. Do you think there's something called the comedy gene that like someone, if he or she isn't born with a comedy gene, he wouldn't even be interested in like performing or comedy in the first place, or that
Nope.
like anyone can do it, anyone can go through the training, and anyone can potentially...
anyone with the right mindset, anyone with the right motivation. 即係等於我識過好多 It's like I know a lot of people who didn't expect to be a parents, and they become great parents today because, wow, I got this, these huge responsibility, and along the way they learn, and it's the same thing. So like when I first started in showbiz, most of the most talented people at the time quit because they can't go through the hurdle. They can't take the mistakes that they learn. They can't even learn from their mistake, by the way, and they just stop, or they can't overcome. Like, oh wow, why I thought it's funny among my friends, but why people in the audience don't laugh, and they don't go and investigate. They blame it on themselves too much instead of listening. And that's really what I learned is from showbiz and from comedies. The best comedian is always the best listener.
That's great.
That's what I learned.
And with that remark, I think we are coming to the end of our podcast, and I'm so happy to be hearing from Steve because I've heard like about how to be a comedian and how to be a performer, like from him for multiple times, but every time I hear him speak about this topic, I think I gain something new, because the thing is, like, it sounds very simple, but actually it takes a very strong person to stay coachable, stay hungry, and keep the desire to learn. And it takes a very strong person to do that. So not everyone has the capacity to be coached. Not everyone wants to hear criticism, and not everyone wants to learn from their mistakes. And that's what is hard. And that's what makes a good performer and a good anything, actually, a good communicator and a good anyone.
It takes hard work to say it.
And it also takes someone who has a healthy self-esteem, someone who can bear with the fact that they have messed up. Yeah, so this is it. I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation, and I think that this is one of the very first, this is in fact the very first podcast episode of many to come. I think I'm gonna record so many episodes with Steve in the future if we work well together. So if you want to support us, if you are interested in hearing our conversation, if you love our podcast, if you have loved this episode, please give us a subscribe. And well, you don't get to like episodes on podcast platforms, by the way, which is very weird. But you can give us a review. I think on Apple Podcasts, something like that, you can give us a review.
Whatever podcast that you use, yeah.
Yeah. On whatever platforms, give us whatever form of feedback, constructive feedback that you have for us. And I hope to talk to you guys and talk to Steve very soon. So,
all right, thank you.
Good, guys. Bye.
Bye.